What do high school history lessons look like in the Charlotte Mason method? How do these lessons prepare the students for the rest of their lives? Today, we are discussing these questions and more to help you give your high schoolers a wide feast of history. Living Book Press provides carefully transcribed living books, not just scans, and almost every physical book includes a free digital edition. With over 400 titles, livingbookpress.com makes it finding resources for your Charlotte Mason journey easy. Use code ADE for 10% off everything. Welcome to A Delectable Education, the podcast that spreads the feast of the Charlotte Mason method. I'm Emily Kaiser, and I'm here with
Liz Cottrill
and Nicole Williams.
And today we reach the upper end of history lessons. These are forms 4 through 6, or high school, or 9th through 12th grade, the end of our education before we pursue secondary education. So, Nicole, would you remind us of what the scope of lessons is at this age?
Sure. History continues to expand, becoming both broader and more deeply integrated with the rest of the curriculum at this stage. Mm-hmm. Students are reading a lot of history per term at this point, and they're using more advanced texts described by Miss Mason as somewhat stiffer than those used in earlier forms. These books, they remain literary and engaging, but they now demand more of the students' reasoning and interpretation skills. At this level, students are typically beginning to make mature connections across subjects. Mm-hmm. Instead of studying just one neighboring country now, one change is students in Form 4, so 9th grade, and up explore contemporary European history. Mm-hmm. So that marks the natural extension of what began in Form 2, offering a fuller picture of global events at this point.
And when you say contemporary, you mean contemporary with the American stream.
Yeah, that run parallel
or their own
to their study,
today.
their own study of
There's
national
just
history.
Confusion about that. So thanks.
Yeah, the goal is to help students see that their own country's history is just one thread in a greater fabric of world history. So now we have 3 established streams. That started earlier, the national, the neighboring, but that is now the broader European and ancient history. Ancient history continues in these upper forms, but it's now more of a survey. Mm-hmm. There's less time spent in the details, but students do still gain a solid grasp of the key movements and the cultures and the figures that shape the ancient world. So the current events that were introduced in Form 3 also continue in these years. But at this stage, the connection between the past and the present becomes even more important. And boy, I experienced this with my own kids. Mm-hmm. As Miss Mason wrote, this course of historical reading is valued exceedingly by young people as affording a knowledge of the past that bears upon and illuminates the present. The present matters deeply to the students at this age, and this type of study prepares them to become thoughtful and informed citizens. Mm-hmm. In fact, more than ever, history becomes the organizing center of the curriculum. As Miss Mason observed, any sketch of the history teaching in Forms 5 and 6, that's our grades 10 through 12, in a given period depend upon a notice of the literature set for plays, novels, essays, lives, poems, are all pressed into service, and where possible, the architecture, painting, which the period produced. Mm-hmm. Just a note, we see that all the way through, but it's even more so now. We just see it enhanced, I guess you'd see in these later years.
They add surveys of architecture and art history and music history that they've never had before, and those are always contemporary with their streams.
Yeah. There's an extra space in the timetable for it.
Yes. So really, they're just getting immersed in a rich integrated study of the humanities at this point, and history sets the stage, and the rest of the feast gathers around it, really. Mm-hmm. It is more demanding work at this level, but it is also very rewarding. Yeah. And the students leave these forms not with just knowledge, but with insight and a habit of connecting past to present, which I think is very important and meaningful, very thoughtful ways.
Yeah. Well, the lesson format for these forms is they still have the 3 streams that they have lessons for. Of course, we talked about current events being additional and daily
Right.
habit, but they have 3 40-minute lessons, so the time has increased by 10 minutes, and this is the longest lesson they ever have, right?
Right.
So that now they have 3 of those a week. And also, students are generally working independently or with siblings within the same level. Even Charlotte Mason mentions that in her volumes, that they're doing most of their reading independently at this age. So they still begin, even if they're working independently. Hopefully it's a habit by now. My husband does this actually. Every time he opens even a read aloud, he's always like, remember what was happening last time?
Right.
And this should be an ingrained habit in their life to recall what was going on in the last lesson, what they learned, and bring that forward to their current reading. And still a single reading. And at this age, they're doing mostly written narrations. Again, it's at least 2 written narrations per day. But also, their narrations are now deepening too, because they should be very naturally applying more of their thoughts and their opinions to their written narration, right? Bringing their own personality to the material, whereas we don't see that as much earlier. I think they're really prepared for that now. And also that they're making connections not just with their own knowledge, but between their subjects that they're reading. And again, what you were saying about all of those other adjunct subjects that really tie into the history, that is so important. They should be making those connections between these different subjects. And then afterwards, after their lesson, after they've done the reading and narration, there should be some discussion. And that can be with their siblings or their classmates if they're doing these lessons in a group, but hopefully with parents and teachers as well. And we do need to make time to do that, even if it's not at the end of that exact lesson. You know, students were even given the instruction, usually in literature, but to read a passage and then 2 days later write their narration. So they're being able to be stretched to recall what they had previously been reading, you know, by a couple days. So we can have these discussions at a later time. The time tools that they're using, they're continuing their Book of Centuries, of course, because that is something that they're supposed to be doing for the rest of their lives. And they're including in there all of the streams of history that they're studying, as well as their Bible history as well. And again, this is not a timeline in a book. It's more like a nature notebook where the student has autonomy over deciding what they want to include in their notebook. Many drawings of artifacts that they've either seen in museums or read about or looked up a picture of. And they also continue to keep their calendar of events about their current events that are happening. That information is not going usually into their Book of Centuries right now because we don't have enough time distant perspective to know really what are the significant things, right? So they have a different thing for that. And then they make 1 to 3 century charts all through their last. So it's started in Form 3. So the last half of their education, they're doing 1 to 3 century charts per year. Depending on the quantity of history, it coordinates with their modern history stream. So the objectives for their lessons are the same as in earlier forms: to develop a living interest with history and to establish relationships. Charlotte Mason sums up our goals, and I just want to read this quote. It says, "It is a great thing to possess a pageant of history in the background of one's thoughts. We may not be able to recall this or that circumstance, but the imagination is warmed. We know that there is a great deal to be said on both sides of every question, and we are saved from crudities in opinion and rashness in action. The present becomes enriched for us with the wealth of all that has gone before." So our teacher prep at this level, you know, we're not doing the lessons entirely with our students anymore, but Charlotte Mason did admonish us to have an understanding sympathy with our students. And I would encourage you to read your students' books. Maybe it's not pre-reading exactly before the week, but to continue reading along even, you know, on your own time, because we need to have that ability to discuss these ideas with them as they are forming their lesson or forming their opinions. And we're not part of their daily lessons usually. Okay, so stiffer books, guys. Here are some that we like to use. Paul Johnson's A History of the American People. It is a definitely more in-depth book if you look at the quantity of text on these pages. And they are really not going to have a lot of time for any biography reading. This is, they're pretty much only in the spine or the general overview type book. We have another one that's newer called Land of Hope. This one is a little harder to use in the earlier rotations of history because there's just such a little bit written. So you really would have to supplement it with hopefully a primary source or other biography at that level. And then for European history, From Dawn to Decadence, because of course the rotations are a little different, and I would encourage you to go look and watch the video that I recorded about how the history rotations work and what quantity of time is studied each year. But forms 4 through 6, their modern streams are only going back to 1500. So this book goes from 1500 to 2000. And it is a stiffer book, but really excellent. And I think, there's going to be a lot of things your kids aren't familiar with, and that's okay. But there are going to be a lot of things they are familiar with, and they're going to get the big ideas. But sometimes that is too challenging. And so this is a book that Charlotte Mason actually reviewed herself right before she died, I think the year before she died. And she used it in Form 3. So it's not as stiff, but it does work for students maybe who are new to the method, who have not been, immersed in these types of
especially
books.
If they don't have the history of the music and art and poetry and
so this is The Story of Mankind by Henrik van Loon, and this edition I think was 2013, I want to say, and so it's been added to. He passed away. He revised it himself in the 60s, and then a couple other editors continued to write the story of the history that had gone on after that in his style. And then for ancients, we do like Edith Hamilton's, this is The Roman Way. She has The Greek Way as well, that give a survey of the ancient stream. So again, this is a smaller book than the other ones, but you're reading this over 1 year versus this over 4. Mm-hmm. And then their history tools are, I would encourage you to look at our history tool planner that we have for sale on our website. It covers all of these tools in great depth, has links and instructions in there. But briefly, here's a look at the Book of Centuries. This is the one from Riverbend Press. This is my own personal one. Here's some pictures and some things in the chart that I have continued to do with my children. And then they also have a free download of a century chart template, but it's just this very simple 10 by 10 squares with thicker lines dividing each decade and the century in half, and they write symbols in here so they can picture a whole century in one page. And then a calendar of events. This is just what we have used in our house because my kids have Juniper Grove journals, and it's a way to keep it easy, accessible. They know where it is. It's just their monthly planner. So it has space in each to just jot a couple notes about events that are happening. But you could use any calendar. You could notebook paper, etc. There's no prescriptions on how to keep that. Mom, do you have any other things that are commonly brought up about high school history lessons?
Well, when you talk about the stiffer reading and the more time.
Yeah.
This is the thing. Yes, the reading is a little more challenging, but they also have longer lessons. So that helps that to work out. And yes, the spines are usually a big step up reading level wise, and the complexity of the ideas that are in those books. And it is a bit of a stretch, but obviously learning harder things is always challenging, but they are gaining some intellectual abilities at this age as well. So they are able to cope with more difficult reading, and it gives them a chance to see how much more they can accomplish, At any rate, I think it's on our part as the parent to not worry about their possible whining and protest about these things, but encourage them when they feel overwhelmed, because a lot of us have experienced this maybe when we went off to college, that books were a challenge at first until we got used to that. On occasion, I do think there are sometimes, don't you, some ancient spines, if you're have multiple students, that you could combine, for example, a Form 3 child with a Form 5 child, or Form 2 and Form 4 sometimes can deal with the same.
If they haven't had that
Right,
already.
right. Obviously, we don't reread books. So, and also, if you have an older student that's jumping in the high school years to this whole idea of this kind of history, it's sometimes worrisome, like, oh, they only have 2 years left, where should I start, and things like that. I would just say whatever they have studied the least in the past maybe is where you want to jump in, and then just go right on forward from there for as many years as they have left.
You know, I just think about the stiffer books, like college will not be the challenge that it was for many of us who never were challenged in this way. And really it sets up these are adult books that weren't written as textbooks for high school students. They were written for adults who wanted to continue their education. And so that's
And they are young adults, and they have a lot of energy that some of that could be put mentally as well as physically.
I just think about moms always worrying that their children aren't prepared for college or won't be prepared for college, and just looking at a course of this kind of reading, you will be well set. So we will be right back. Join us in Traverse City on the coast of Lake Michigan for Awaken, a Living Books educational conference held on Friday and Saturday, July 17th and 18th, 2026. This conference will feature speakers Liz Catrill, Emily Kaiser, Nicole Williams of A Delectable Education, Michelle Howard, the Living Books Lady, and Melissa Peterman of Charlotte Mason PE. The conference will begin on Friday with immersion classes, an evening session, and a chance to gather in small groups. Join us Saturday for workshops, keynote speakers, and vendors that will teach, delight, and encourage the home educating family. Special sessions have been added for teens and kids. Traverse City, Michigan is known as a foodie destination, and lunch will feature a Whole Foods menu with gluten and dairy-free options. Visit this incredible city with your family and be refreshed, encouraged, and inspired by the surroundings and speakers. Registration begins in February. Please visit the website www.livingbooksconference.com for more information. A wide feast of history lessons is given to feed our students throughout their education. It is wide, but it is also deep, with these 3 cycles through history with concurrent streams, allowing us to cover much ground in a short amount of time. So next week we will conclude our history series as we answer the most common practical questions that we hear about this subject. Thank you for joining us as we continue to spread the feast of the Charlotte Mason Method. If you benefited from this conversation, please like and subscribe. We hope our discussion serves to equip and encourage you as we seek to explain the Charlotte Mason Method. You can find the show notes in the video description or by visiting adelectableeducation.com/episodes. There, you'll find the links and quotes we mentioned in today's episode. We are so grateful for our loyal Patreon supporters who help make this show possible. If you'd like to partner with us in our work here at A Delectable Education, you can join our Patreon community and receive exclusive and early content as our thank you for your monthly support. Find out more at patreon.com/adelectableeducation. Thank you for joining us today. We'll see you next time.